this gentleman sit down, catch his breath a minute. Okay, good afternoon. Let's call the meeting to order. Welcome, those of you who are here from the public, to the General Plan Advisory Committee. And I'm going to ask Ben to call out roll call.
Thank you, Chair Greer. So in lieu of calling out names, I think I can do a visual roll call and just note who is absent. So noting that all members are present with exception of Committee Member Black, Committee Member Clougherty, Committee Member DeSantis, Committee Member Laidlaw, Committee Member Love just showed up, right? That's you, right? Yeah, okay. Maniscalchi, Pearson, Wahlberg has an excused absence, and Christy Walker is also absent. Everyone else is present. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ben. Okay, moving on to public comments on non-agenda items. None? Okay, bring it back to the days. And moving on to current business. Oops, do we have a public comment? Okay, public comment. Nancy Scarborough.
Hi, my name is Nancy Scarborough. I'd like to suggest that the larger committee request a presentation by two staff people, one from finance to give us kind of an overview of our budget, revenue, and expenses, and another from someone from community development to talk about the demographics of the city, age, income levels, type of housing, that kind of thing. I think that that would be very interesting for all of us, and since we are making decisions for these people, it would be nice to know who they are. Thank you.
That sounds like a great idea. So noted, Ben. Could you look into that for us? Okay. All right. Any other public comments on the agenda? Okay. None? Okay. Bring it back to the days. Current business. The meeting minutes of May 3rd. See your attachment in draft minutes. Are there any changes to the minutes that have been submitted by the city staff? Mr. Mosher?
Thank you, Chair, Co-Chair Greer.
Mm-hmm.
I read the minutes. I thought they were accurate, except for the very last sentence about the adjournment of the previous meeting. It says the next meeting is scheduled for June 12th at 6 p.m. I don't recall that actually the next meeting was scheduled at the last meeting. I thought our normal agreement was we would meet on the first Wednesday at 5 p.m. And I do not recall learning about this change to a non-standard date and time that we're at tonight until later in May sometime. I think I heard it at a planning commission meeting. So I don't know what is accurate or not, but if it was not scheduled at the last meeting, perhaps it should just say adjourned to a date to be determined.
Okay, so noted. Any other changes? I have one. On handwritten page 11, Chair Greer noted the 2014 Arts and Culture Master Plan on the city website and request for consultant support by the subcommittee. I had noted that there is a city cultural master plan on the city website. It's an Arts and Culture Master Plan, and it's available for the committee to reference from time to time. So if you could make that distinction, that would be great. Any other additions and revisions? May I have a motion to approve the minutes? All right.
I'll second.
Watkins moved, and a second from Debbie Stevens. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? None. Okay. All right. Moving on to the next item on the agenda is an update on the consultant for the comprehensive update attachment number 2, revised scope of services for DUDEC. Ben? Thank you.
Hey, good evening, GPAC members and Co-Chair Greer. Just a brief update on the consultant for the comprehensive update, and I just want to say I did receive Committee Member Mosher's comments and appreciate them. We can go into them at your pleasure. Attached to your agenda as attachment number 2, you do see a red line strikeout version of the scope of services for the comprehensive update. You'll be able to see the changes that we had relayed at the May 3rd meeting, wherein they added additional outreach scope, predominantly looking at additional ways to reach the community. You'll notice that they included a new subtask called Go to Them meetings, which are supposed to be like a meeting on demand, where you can go to HOA meetings and other meetings that are already scheduled with presentations. So that they did add responsive scopes and subtasks rather into the scope of services that we felt addressed the committee's concerns. You'll also notice that they added in a component about the optional sustainability element and looking to include some best practices on resiliency and sustainability that other cities are using, and presenting those as part of the general plan diagnostic memo. They've also have put an emphasis on an online plan, and I want to kind of touch on that. I know that Mr. Mosier had brought up a concern about that being the only deliverable for the general plan format, and we wanted to emphasize that this document is not something that we feel should just be put into a book binding and placed on a shelf. I'll let the record note that Co-Chair Evans arrived at 5:10 p.m., so he is present. Thank you. Wanted to make sure that it's something that is usable by the community and also by city staff and by elected officials to guide policy decisions and analysis. We believe that there are better ways to present that information. So there's a lot of focus on the online plan. However, I don't think it's the intention to only have an online plan. There would still be accessible copies that would be made available in printed format. So I just want to make that point of distinction. As far as where we are headed with this revised scope of services, I guess the last thing I do want to touch on before I go into that, there's also a question about the schedule. As many know, when you engage a consultant, one of the first tasks is to identify a project schedule. So there were no major updates to the project schedule in terms of when we look to finish the comprehensive update, but it is going out into the latter portion of 2025. And then as far as when the deliverables will be provided, that is something we will get into at the project kickoff and the project schedule. When we identify the project schedule, and obviously those components will be coming before you all for input. Just let the record reflect that Community Member Maniscalchi is arrived as of 5:11 p.m. So with that, we will be taking the DUDEC professional services agreement to City Council at June 27th regular meeting, looking to bring them on contract fairly rapidly so that they can provide support and kick off and begin supporting the subcommittees. And I did notice in the scope of services, it does talk about the GPAC having subcommittees, so they are familiar with the subcommittee structure, and they do intend on providing support that we need to make sure that those subcommittees are productive and moving forward in a way that is technically correct and best in line with best practices, as well as what the subcommittee's visions are. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but I just wanted to let the GPAC know that we are moving forward with DUDEC, and they should be hopefully on contract early part of July.
Thank you, Ben. Comments? Okay. Mr. Globe?
2, 3. So, Ben, if I hear you correctly, you're saying that while it might not be chronicled perfectly in their proposal, that there's sufficient time available from DUDEC to support the subcommittees?
Yes, that's correct. I know that they indicate 34 one-hour meetings, but obviously there is some flexibility, not obviously, but there is some flexibility baked into the hours to support more if necessary.
Other comments on the DUDEC update? Nothing? Okay. Mr. Mosher? Yes.
Thank you, Ben. One of my comments you did not address, and perhaps was answered this afternoon. I was looking through the agenda for tomorrow's council meeting, and I see our other consultant, Kimberly Horn, is doing some work on the noise element. Is it true that DUDEC will not be supporting this group on the noise element at all? Is that omission intentional?
I wouldn't say the omission is intentional. You're correct that Kimberly Horn is taking the lion's share of the work on updating the noise element for housing implementation. However, as we've noted, the elements are open for discussion outside of just the housing element implementation track. Although it's not scoped out in here specifically, that is not something that I would foresee as being excluded from the general plan diagnostic memo, for example, if there is a best practice that we do not have incorporated in the noise element today.
So does that mean, other than with regard to the housing element, we will be receiving we will be receiving some technical background, but no actual consultant guidance?
That's not the case.
No.
Although it's not explicitly included in the scope, again, they will be providing a baseline diagnostic memo on all the elements in the general plan, and that would include any technical support required for updates therein. So it is included, but predominantly, the lion's share of the work will be coming from Kimberly Horn to update for the housing element implementation.
I have a question. So I'm not clear on that. So we have signed up for different subcommittees. One of those was the noise committee. So what you are saying is that noise committee is not going to meet and make changes? Or will they meet and make changes with Kimberly Horn? Or they're just going to meet and nothing happens?
No, understood. Thank you for the question. Yes, so the noise element subcommittee has not yet convened, and I appreciate that. And that is my committee to gather, and I haven't done that yet. We are still working on an approach to revise the noise element to implement the housing in the airport area, and that is something that is being actively worked on. We wanted to have that straightened out before we convene the noise element subcommittee. So it's very intentional that we have not yet done that, but that should be coming down very soon.
Okay, thank you. I just think there are noise elements in other parts of the city other than the airport. And so I just want to make sure we're not leaving that out.
Appreciate your comment.
I have a question, Ben. On arts, culture, and historical, will DUDEC be taking any part, or is that just the three elements that they're engaged to do?
So in the revised scope, they do have some additional subtasks in the historical resources. Actually, I think these were already in there. Arts and cultural, so they do have some additional subtasks that they've identified for a lot of the historic resources, for example. They've got a refresh of the local historic resources list as a potential task. And then they will be doing, again, best practices for the general plan diagnostic memo to present to the arts and cultural element subcommittee for consideration. But largely that is an optional element. So I would say you have more flexibility in terms of guiding that element from a subcommittee standpoint. You don't have technical parameters to really follow, if that makes sense.
Okay, yes. Okay. A lot has changed since 2006 with arts and culture, especially with the arrival of the Sculpture Garden exhibition from now into infinity and the programming of that. So we're hoping to have a little more emphasis in that area, a little. Okay, thank you. Any other comments from members of the committees? No? Oh, yes, Paul Watkins.
Thanks, Arlene. Just a general observation by somebody who's not educated at all in consultant agreements and how many pop-ups and how many community outreaches and how much media attention. Those of us that worked a little bit with Newport together, some of the outreach to the public was helpful and some was not quite as helpful as maybe we had all hoped. And I think public outreach is real important, but it seems to me that the guts of what we're trying to end up with is good ideas, good policies, good objectives and good policies and well-written stuff that probably is the focus of the DUDEC group. And I guess my observation is that that's pretty key, pretty critical stuff. And to the extent that we don't have enough wiggle room to make sure that ideas, and those of us involved in subcommittees so far have seen wonderful ideas, and DUDEC's not there yet, but hopefully they will be, and we can write them down, develop them, compare and contrast to Pasadena and San Diego and Malibu and Redondo Beach, and see what makes sense for us based on DUDEC's experience in other jurisdictions, and then come up with and concentrate on goals, objectives, drafting, and development of those ideas for us to ultimately flesh out into a new general plan. So it seems to me that the comment I'm kind of interested in making is have we focused enough in the DUDEC contract on the real key element of this whole exercise, and that is doing a bang-up job on the general plan. The other stuff's important, but drafting ideas, evolution of ideas, and ultimately goals and objectives, it seems to me to be pretty dang critical. Thanks.
Thank you, Committee Member Watkins. Yeah, great comment. So just a couple of thoughts there. The revised scope, as you noticed, has a few different subtasks that have been added to make the outreach and engagement more robust. The first deliverable is a comprehensive community outreach and engagement plan, and part of your agenda today is actually forming an outreach subcommittee. So we do want the GPAC and the steering committee's input on that outreach and engagement plan and forming what that looks like. And as far as having the flexibility to reallocate some of these tasks, you absolutely can do that. So if we think that 20 go-to meetings is not a good approach, we can definitely reallocate some of that elsewhere and come up with a different component of the outreach and engagement plan. Ultimately, that will all fold into the baseline analysis and the general plan diagnostic memo to kind of dovetail the two and see what the community's vision is and how we update the elements to be responsive to that vision. So I think they do go together, but I'm confident that based on the revised scope, they've added in additional resources to the outreach and engagement component that could be reallocated elsewhere if necessary. And I hope that addressed your comment.
Thank you. Okay, other comments on the DUDEC before we go out to public comment? Okay, let's have public comment on this item on the agenda. Public comment? Okay. I'll bring that back to the days. I suppose we can close on that issue, that item on the agenda. And there's no recommended action for that item. The next item on the agenda, C, is an update on the implementation of the housing element. Ben?
Thank you again, Co-Chair Greer. Just a brief update for implementing the housing element. As you noticed here, we do mention the EIR, which is the technical evaluation is underway. There are several sections that are being prepared. And on that note, we are looking to do a scoping meeting later this month. We have a tentative date identified of June 28th. And obviously there will be a notice provided in advance of that meeting for any who want to attend. The notice of preparation should hopefully be going out this week. If it doesn't, we may look at a different date for the scoping meeting, but that's our date for now, and that's what we want to target. The traffic analysis as far as vehicle miles traveled and level of service against our general plan policies is well underway and will be continually prepared as we move forward with the preparation of the EIR. As far as the implementation component, obviously one of the biggest pieces is the land use policies and goals, which the subcommittee will provide you a better update as we move forward into the agenda. But just wanted to note that the environmental impact report is moving forward and primarily get the scoping meeting on the committee's radar in case any of you would like to attend. So again, tentatively scheduled for later in the evening on June 28th.
Comments on this item? Okay. Jeremy, do you have anything to add?
No.
All right. Okay. Going out to public comment on this item? Public comment? Okay, there being none, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. Item D, land use element goals and policies related to Banning Ranch. At the June 5th, 2023 meeting, GPAC Land Use Element Subcommittee meeting, there was a robust discussion what changes should be made to the land use elements goals and policies related to Banning Ranch, given the acquisition of the property by the Trust for Public Land. Okay. Ben?
You said it best with that description, but the recommended action here is to really just discuss among the group and consider making a recommendation to the steering committee as far as how and when policy and goal changes for Banning Ranch may need to be considered. It's kind of a free-form discussion, and perhaps someone who was at the subcommittee meeting on the subcommittee would like to start us off. It looks like maybe Jim wants to provide some comments, so thank you, Jim.
Okay, this is on. Okay, so as the committee may recall, in the Banning Ranch area, we currently have a designation for Banning Ranch. It's really kind of got a hybrid, if you will, one for if the site is acquired, and it would be basically devoted for conservation and public access and a variety of other uses. Now, if that were not to occur, the general plan calls out for a residential community made up of 1,375 units, a 75-room hotel, and 75,000 square feet of commercial, basically a small shopping center, or some restaurants and what have you, maybe support the hotel and the residents. And so that there is that general plan designation for that, and then there also, with that basic description, and there also are a series of policies, and I can't remember the total number, but there's probably a dozen policies that relate to this. And I guess the issue is that the existing policies are really, don't reflect the current reality, which is really the acquisition has occurred. And then ultimately, there will be a different project there. So we have a new property owner, the Mountains Conservancy Recreation Authority. Their stated goal is to conserve the property, which is really that first option that the general plan speaks to. So now, I guess the committee is really seeking some guidance and maybe a recommendation from the full group here, and I think maybe the Land Use Element Subcommittee may be able to help me out here a little bit. But I guess the thought is, do we want to update those policies that relate to Banning Ranch comprehensively now to eliminate that optional land use, meaning that residential, hotel, and small commercial component, eliminate that entirely from the policies? So now the housing element right now, all it does is increase the housing by 100 units, which is a simple amendment. Just change 1375 to 1475, and we will have implemented the housing element in that regard. And so I guess the committee would like to have a discussion and maybe formulate a recommendation to the steering committee, which then might go on to the city council, which is to make a more fundamental change to eliminate that entire residential community there. So hopefully that provides a little bit of context as to where we're going, and happy to facilitate additional discussions. So, Dennis?
Yeah, I want to make sure I heard you correctly. Was this to modify the existing general plan? Is that what I heard? Or just going forward, we're scratching it? We're not going to go back and change the existing general plan. That's not what you said.
Well, we're not changing the housing element at this
No,
point.
no, I meant regarding Banning Ranch. I'm sorry. Just specifically, because when you handed out that sample for us to look at the last meeting, that it had what you just said, and we said that is moot. And then you said to change it, but I didn't understand whether you meant going forward or going to the existing one, and then going forward.
So I think the nature of the discussion is really, are we going to make a fundamental change to those policies and eliminate the housing option for Banning Ranch or not? Do we want to make that recommendation to the steering committee and then maybe ultimately to the city council? I think that's what the committee was asking for.
Okay,
And if
yeah.
I've misread what the committee is thinking about, the subcommittee, I should say, then I would hope that other committee members would step forward and help us out with this discussion, because I think the issue as I read it was to change the land use element policies fundamentally to eliminate that option.
Yeah, well, it's already been eliminated. We're just going to formalize it.
Charles?
Thank you. So I'm the one that brought this up, so I'll explain it. It's my argument that since the financing that was used to purchase that property precludes it from ever being residential, that now is the time for the city of Newport Beach to update every element that mentions Banning Ranch for commercial or residential use to reflect the reality. I realize that it's in the housing element and it's been approved and great, but where it doesn't have to be listed, I suggest that we take it out. And Jim said at the time, if the committee wants to do that, we can make that recommendation to the council. It's my suggestion that we do. At the subcommittee, there really wasn't a consensus to do that. So the idea was brought forward to bring it to the whole committee because it's a pretty monumental thing. But I don't see any benefit in leaving it the way it is. If somebody has one, please explain it. Thank you.
Dennis?
Is there any reason to not, what would be the reason, the downside of leaving it in there, just for the sake of argument? I'm opposed to that, but.
I'm afraid that we're going to do a circulation element update, assuming 1,475 homes up there that are never going to be there. So the circulation element shouldn't reflect that level of intensity that needs to be mitigated, in my opinion.
So the basis of what we're building going forward should be based on reality. Yeah.
My opinion.
And I like, and I don't, are we leading to a motion on this, or is this just for discussion? So
This is discuss and consider making a recommendation to the GPUSC committee for regarding Banning Ranch.
okay, well, I would make the recommendation that we update it to reflect reality.
Comment, Mr. Rader?
I just would like to hear one argument that why we would keep it the way it is right now from steering committee or anybody say why we should just do it.
You're not going to hear it from this member of the steering committee.
Yeah, so
Is this on?
And-
So I'll say it, but I don't necessarily agree with it, okay? But it's like if the owner of Banning Ranch ever wanted to do something different, they wouldn't have to go back and do a general plan amendment. That would be the reason. Or if they found that they needed money to make some of the changes, that kind of stuff, that would be the reason. Jim, did you have anything else? Does that make sense?
Sure, I'm not going to make an argument one way or the other, but I'll at least explain some rationale here. And the thought would be is right now they're going through a planning process there to decide how they're going to use the property. Now, primarily it will be for conservation, open space, habitat protection, all those fine things. Public access is going to be a component of that, but if a residential community is not going to be a part of that, then maybe it should be updated. The thought is to leave these allocations in the general plan. It gives some flexibility for future use, because what if in that plan, and it costs $100 million to get that plan to work, and they decide, well, here's the revenue source. So if we built a small community here, we can actually then get some revenue that'll help conserve the property, provide the necessary infrastructure that they need for whatever it is they plan there. So it only just provides that opportunity for a revenue stream through development of maybe a small portion, but again, right now, the Conservancy is not talking to the city of Newport Beach. If they are, they're not talking to the planning division. We don't know what their full plans are. We've heard represented that housing cannot occur, and that may be true. We don't know. But my thought is that if we're going to change Banning Ranch fundamentally in the policies, I think we should do so in full consultation with them, find out what it is they want to do, because what I wouldn't want to do is to just eliminate everything out of the general plan and just talk about conservation and open space, and then for them to come back, 6 months after that decision is made to say, well, it might be nice if we had that campsite in there, and if we eliminate the hotel, then can they do a campsite? Well, maybe a general plan will be required. We don't want to put them in that position. So my thought is whatever recommendation that the committee comes up with, that it that it involve a dialogue with the new conservancy and make sure we're all on the same page before we start making changes. That's just some advice.
Nancy, please.
I have to say, I agree with asking them. I have been to their meetings and I have heard from them that they cannot have any residential because of the financing. But I think the larger committee needs to have that reassurance that that is really what we're dealing with here, because maybe, maybe things have changed. But so I think maybe inviting them to a meeting and ask them to talk to us at another meeting.
Nancy and I had the same thought too, Charles. I know we had like a robust discussion about that. And I think we were going to try to set up a meeting or do something. Yeah.
So the discussion about being annexed to the city of Newport Beach is on an agenda meeting between the Conservancy and the MRC folks in the next week. And, as Nancy said, maybe we can invite them here. I agree, Jim, they should be a party to it. I think I know what they want, but if a hotel translates to a campsite, I don't want to be responsible for canceling out their campsite, because that's a very likely possibility.
Mr. Baker?
Yeah, and you made reference to the Conservancy. You said the Conservancy. I'm not sure who you're referring to, but the Banning Ranch Conservancy, if that's who, okay, not, okay. Because they're kind of like out of the picture in a sense.
Yeah, the mountains.
I'm not sure everybody on this committee is aware. The real driver of this whole process is actually the California Coastal Conservancy. And the California Coastal Conservancy is funding the MRC to take on this. So they're backing them in addition to what they put in for the purchase to that. So the California Coastal Conservancy has a lot of say as to what's going on. I think we don't need to go off into that too much, but I think that what we're talking about right now is just having a clean, realistic basis, and that's why I made the motion. I'd like to see a nice, solid, realistic foundation.
Mr. Glider?
Question, is there a deed restriction or something, vehicle we know that there is restricting?
The money that was, all of the money that was given to them was restricted from being residential. Every bit of it, not just one.
Any other comments?
I agree with Dennis that we should go ahead and do it. I can talk loud enough.
Okay. Mr. Carlson.
Jim Carlson. I agree with Dennis. I think we should go ahead and do this and just bring it up to date and just leave it out. Just change it to reflect what the policy is right now. Or we could have somebody go out and talk to these people and get, but I don't know if we need to have them come here and just give us a general update. Yeah.
Jim, is it possible to have a meeting with them? Maybe not with the whole group, but at least get a report back as to, a vision is what they want to do so we can make a recommendation?
Certainly, staff, we could reach out to them and see if we can start that dialogue. Assuming they're fairly busy at this point in time, but I think it's probably time that we have that start those discussions. We've been fairly patient, waiting for them to reach out to us once they develop a plan. But I think if we're looking to update the general plan policies related to this and do it now, again, I think that dialogue is important so that we don't put any roadblocks in front of them, and that it at least accurately reflects what it is they might intend to do. But the one thing I have to caution the entire group about is that, the EIR is being written for the housing element implementation, not to change policies for Banning Ranch. And so whatever it is that we come up with this, I really want to make sure we don't make, significant changes to the project description to where the EIR has to be rewritten. Because if that's the case, then I've got cost overruns with Kimley Horn, and it'll probably delay the entire effort. So I want to make sure what we do doesn't translate into any potential physical change to the environment. If we're just taking away some policy options that don't reflect a future project, then I think we're probably safe. So we just got to make sure we don't go too far afield of our overall plan, which is, again, to implement the housing element. And I think strategically there's some advantage to doing this. I think I mentioned that during the subcommittee meeting. And I think maybe after having that dialogue with the Mountains Conservancy Recreation Authority, I think that's what they're called. And I'm not referring to the Banning Ranch Conservancy. I probably never will. The Conservancy is this new group, the new owner. And then, we get on the same page, and if it doesn't have that impact to the overall project and schedule and EIR, then I think, we can maybe move forward and bring something forward to the steering committee and then possibly to the city council.
Mr. Baker?
Yeah, on having them come down here, I'm totally supportive of having staff reach out to them. I have had conversation with Greg Garther of the Coastal Conservancy, and he was very specific. He said this whole process that they're dealing with at the Conservancy is going to probably be 4 or 5 years, and he said we're like 5 minutes into that. Because Nancy and I are with another organization, and we've considered bringing them down to present to us over Orange Coast River Park, and that was the response I got. Like, no, just hang on, wait a minute. So I just certainly reach out to them, but I doubt if we're going to hear anything from them for quite a while till they get all their ducks in line and figure out what the heck they're doing.
Well, I suppose just as they thought, if housing is off the table, we can tell them we're considering taking all the housing units out of our general plan and maybe just leave it at that. And that might be perfectly okay with them, even though they're only 5 minutes into a 5-year planning effort. Shouldn't take that long to plan for it, but obviously there needs to be some consultations. But maybe that's what we're really kind of doing at this point in time. And then maybe wordsmithing some of the policies to eliminate kind of the acquisition statements, which has already occurred and is out of date.
Thanks, Jim. Robert, please.
So if we leave it as is, how does it affect the property owners in West Newport with their property lines? Would we be looking at widening 17th Street or 16th and the streets over there? Or, if I'm a property owner and this is never going to happen, but then I want to rebuild a building and I lose a setback or something, is that possible?
So the master plan of highways is in our circulation element, and right at the moment there are no changes that are anticipated with that. Now 15th Street is undersized and requires a 12-foot dedication on both sides of the street to provide a 4-lane highway through there on 15th Street. So if somebody were looking to redevelop those properties along 15th Street, then there would be a conversation about doing that consistent with the general plan. Now, if the development potential for and the roadway connections that go forward through Banning Ranch, if that changes, then we may not need quite that amount of capacity. But 15th Street is being widened not just for Banning Ranch and the potential development at Banning Ranch, it's also connecting to a street called Bluff Road, which then connects from Coast Highway all the way up to 19th Street. And so a fair amount of regional traffic will go through there as a result of those connections. Takes pressure off of Superior and Coast Highway. And so while there are no changes to that kind of circulation pattern, I don't think it would necessarily change the need to widen it if those roadways are ever built, even if it is just open space. Because to be perfectly frank with you, 1,375 units, a 75,000 square foot shopping center, and a 75-room hotel. And while it generates traffic and the roadways would be sized to handle that, there's probably more through traffic coming off Coast Highway and Superior than and Placentia than that development would really need. So long story short, I don't think it would actually change the circulation element and the need to actually widen 15th Street in the future. There are no plans or need to widen 16th Street because the 15th Street and 19th Street were really going to be the access points for Banning Ranch.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table, so procedurally we have to figure that out. Either take the motion back or we revise it to include some piece about waiting for some response, if any, from the Conservancy or MRC, right?
That's
yeah.
But I don't think that wasn't part of my motion. My motion was just to move it not
Okay.
I would second that. I think it'll take enough time for this to work its way through. The other committee has to recommend to the council has to agree to it. By then, there'll be a meeting or something. So I'm in favor.
So point of clarification, if I might, when you say take it out, what are you referring to? I mean, are we
Okay,
just
so
taking
my
the
understanding
housing
was
out?
that what is in the general plan right now that you presented to us, you gave us that copy, is impossible to meet under the new conditions. So that's why I was asking, like, is this like, are we talking about what's in the past? My motion was reflecting basically what is changing, what is existing now, and that may not be practical. I mean, this may not be worth the effort, because I'm assuming it would take an amendment. But right now, we're building, it's like you're building a house, and you're building a house on a faulty foundation, a foundation that has incorrect information in it. And that's why I did ask, and I'm willing to withdraw the motion if it is not consequential. Those of you just say, okay, it doesn't matter because we're building a new general plan and we all know this is the situation, and then fine. But I'm always uncomfortable when there's something false, something that is just can't happen in a document, in an official document. That concerns me. So that's why I'm even bringing it. That's why I'm pursuing it.
So
Make me comfortable with it.
my point of clarification is really to understand what it is, how you want to remove that entire option for development beyond the conservation. So the whole thing. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
The part that in reality is not going to happen, barring some extremely, some extreme changes.
Thank you for the clarification. So I think we had a second for the motion with Mr. Watkins.
I think the motion has this been clarified that we're just talking about the housing element, correct?
No, this is the land use element.
This is land use element and the, which is a subset of that, right?
The part that said, it was the part that said, if the property cannot be acquired for open space, yada yada, we're going to we can build hotels and housing and everything else on, which is moot. It's just a moot point. It's part of the document that just doesn't make any sense because of changing circumstances, obviously. And I mean, it's not. We managed to very easily amend unfair. We managed to amend the general plan because somebody wants to change their development a little bit or build their house a little different. We amend the general plan all the time. Why wouldn't you make corrections to the general plan when there's information that is not realistic? To me, and all I'm saying is I think we should recommend that be done. That's what my motion is. We don't have the power to do it, obviously, but all we're doing is saying we think this should be changed. We could be shot down on it, obviously.
And the motion would only be to go up to the general plans at the steering committee, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if maybe we ought to nibble around the edges, as Jim suggests, rather than, kill the whole thing, whether we ought to just ask the owner if housing is their main concern, and if so, then we can eliminate housing. I like the idea of the possibility of a campsite. I mean, that might be something they do want to retain in the future. But if we kind of start with the elimination of housing up there, that seems to be the main focus of so many people's objections to the development of Banning Ranch. And then, I guess we could expand from there, but that's certainly the start, and it's an easy question to ask, right, to the owner, is housing something that you foresee reinforcing elimination of by our GPAC groups?
Good point.
Yeah, I don't want to step out of parliamentary procedure, but if we were to clarify the motion the GPAC would like the land use element to reflect the intent of the Mountain Conservancy group. and that we work towards that, and we understand what they're looking for. We're not just picking out random numbers, but we're open to talking to them a little bit more, and ultimately having our recommendations to the land use mirror what they're looking to do and what we agree to.
Yeah, Robert, so that would be a friendly amendment. Would you be willing to accept that?
Yeah, I don't think this is urgent in the sense that we even have to deal with it. I would not be opposed to tabling this until staff can reach out and get if staff just got a response, just contact them and said, hey, is there any chance, otherwise, what is your response if we said we have this element, this is in our existing general plan, what is your response to that? And if they go, you guys are nuts, that's not going to happen. That's a pretty significant. Now, if we got that back, then I think maybe the rest of the committee, I know what the answer is going to be, but I don't want to presume to speak for them. But I'm more than happy to table it and say, staff, go check with them and see if you get a response from them and bring it back, and we can talk about this later. It isn't an urgent issue.
As I recall, the Land Use Committee has a meeting next week on Monday, correct? So could they not discuss this more in meeting and come a little bit more organized back to the larger committee with something more finalized to go back from the committee here up to the steering committee?
That's one reason it came here, because there wasn't an agreement. They were sort of in different spots and thought by coming here, get some feedback from GPAC. So yes, they can certainly do that if you want to table the motion.
I'd support
Yeah,
that. Thanks, Tim.
I'll table it. But table it, not withdraw it.
I'll second that motion to table it. Do we need to vote? Would you prefer that we vote? We have it, since we have it on the agenda, we should probably vote, take a vote of that. So we'll go back to the committee. The Land Use Committee
What I
will
might
come back.
suggest is that is the maker of the motion willing to withdraw the motion so that motion's off the table?
I don't want to withdraw it. I want to table it. Otherwise, I just want it to sit there and percolate.
And then that's fine. That's fine. It might be good to go ahead and vote on tabling.
But
the
we
motion.
can vote on the tabling. That was my question to her.
Are we voting?
Yes, that would be appropriate.
Okay. All in favor of tabling the motion, and we'll go back to the committee and come back to us? Aye? Do we have a majority here? Okay, majority rules. Table the motion, goes back to committee, and we'll see it next time in this meeting, and then the plan would be up to the steering committee from there.
Just procedurally, though, any abstentions or any opposition to that tabling? No? And then I noticed that, Ms. Williams, did you have a comment at all? We're good? Okay.
No abstentions, okay. So we're unanimous, okay. Moving on to item E, formation of an outreach subcommittee. Staff recommends GPAC form the outreach subcommittee to help guide city staff and consultants on outreach engagement. The recommended action is to discuss and identify members who will serve on the outreach subcommittee. Comments?
Just question, just could I get more elaboration of what they're going to do?
I was gonna say the
I'm
same
probably
thing.
ahead of you on that, but yeah.
Ben or Jim, could you guys comment on that real quick? And then maybe we can solicit some volunteers.
Sure. So one of the first deliverables that DUDEC's going to be working on is that outreach plan. So it's going to be detailed, it's going to be extensive, it's going to take what you saw in the proposal to an actual actionable document, which will explain how they're going to engage with the community, how the website's going to be managed, how are these pop-up events going to happen. And so I think that plan right there is going to take a little time to get through, and we thought it would be helpful to prepare and get a committee on board so that when that draft comes in, we can give it to the committee, get feedback, make sure it's doing everything that we think we want to do, and see if there's anything missing in there. And so it would be helpful to have a committee guide staff on that.
Any volunteers? Jim, please. Harry.
No, I'm not volunteering. I just, I wanted to clarify the committee is advising this committee?
Yes, so this would be a subcommittee of GPAC, just as we have the other subcommittees, but they would also just focus on reviewing the outreach plan and then bringing back a recommendation for the full committee for its approval.
Debbie Stevens?
So didn't we have this kind of a program plan for a couple years ago, Jim? I mean, with Newport
remember it.
Together.
Mhm.
I mean, it's going to be similar, right?
I think the plan will look a lot like the outreach plan that was done for the housing element. I think there's going to be additional focus areas based on what the input from the committee before and in their scope of services. But I think it would be helpful to have somebody other than staff look at this.
Okay,
hence
so
the request.
kind of like what was done before, but improve. I mean, we did not get good turnout, and that was probably the biggest complaint, I think. So, okay.
So,
but at least make sure they have that plan, because it does contain quite a bit of information.
I think the value of this is that your committee has had extensive discussions. I mean, this was one of the most talked about topics in our first couple of meetings. And a dissatisfaction, well, my concern is that without a lot of input and very close input, that we're going to get the same thing. And the benefit right now is we've had the experience. At least many of us know, gee, this really worked well, this didn't work as well. So I think if you could have a committee that was working closely, and when they started down a path that you thought was not valid or going to produce much, could come back to the committee as a whole and say, how do you all feel? And then we could make that course adjustment.
I'm very excited about this particular item. I think it's the opportunity to get the community engaged and have their input will help each and every one of us with all of these elements. So I will volunteer for that. And Mr. Baker, you volunteer?
You need to make a motion and be sure that they want the committee first. It has to be formed.
Oh, yes, right. Absolutely.
Okay, I'll make the motion then. since I just got recognized, that's not what I'll make the motion and I'll volunteer for the committee if the motion passes. And I'll comment. I'll add an additional comment once the motion's on the floor.
And we will have
seconded.
additional comment once we have a second. We can go back to more comment. We should go out to public comment as well.
I'll second.
Okay.
So
Charles?
I've got a comment, and no, I'm not volunteering. I'm on every other committee already. But Susan DeSantis, who's not here tonight, should be approached about volunteering for this committee. She had a lot of input in the earlier committee on that, and I know she's passionate about it, but she's not here to volunteer. I'm not volunteering her, but I expect that she would be interested. So can you make sure to reach out to her to ask her that? Thank you.
Ben, will you do that? Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. Dennis, another comment?
Yeah, I'm sure talking a lot, aren't I? My comment on it is that I think it's the type of committee that needs to have a fairly broad spectrum. So, I mean, I know there's, more, we're all volunteers. This is what we're doing. But, for example, I personally am not terribly interested in website design, that component of it. So I think that would be important that somebody on the committee was, if possible. I'm more interested in the physical events and the outreach ad events and stuff like that. That's the area that I'm interested in. So I'm going to be kind of ho-hum in the other part if I'm on the committee. So I don't know how we do that. I mean, I don't know how we make, or if we even can make it a well-rounded. I think I'm like you. I think I'm excited about it, and I think it's really, 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 really important, and partly because of what some of us has commented about the last go-round, and to Debbie's words a moment ago. Yeah.
Right. I just had a comment. Anne?
Hi, this is Annie Clardy. I had a question.
Yes.
Before I would volunteer for this, my question would be to Debbie, because you said that you were involved and that it was really disappointing as far as, can you just give like a 30-second synopsis of what you thought the failures were, so that for someone who would think about volunteering would be to make sure that it was a fit?
Okay, so thanks. That probably needs to be clarified. What was more frustrating is that we didn't get a number of people in attendance. I don't think I actually supported what the consultants were doing. It's just that getting people to the events, which is what we really needed, and the input was disappointing. So I wouldn't say that it was, and it was more the time, if you want my my opinion. It was just people weren't showing up to the event. So that's a thing that, we got to try to do better, and hopefully we can do that.
So the consultants' outreach to get other community members knowing this was mostly events, and that was kind of a failure.
Yes, I think that's
it.
kind of a good summary.
Is this the event the Arts Commission participated in and we had here, right here on the green? And
That was one of them.
We had various booths. Is that? Can anyone remember the exact consultant who did that, so that I could be sure that it was the?
It is Cairns and West, who is a sub-consultant to DUDEC.
All right. Okay, I remember.
I am not volunteering for this committee because I'm on several, but I do know that Kurt Black has a lot of experience with websites and a younger generation, and I think we should at least approach him. I'm not volunteering him either. He's out of the state today, but I think he might be interested in this, and I think he'd be very good at it.
Noted, and I'll reach out to him as well. Thank you.
Nancy, what was the name again?
Kurt Black.
Thank you. Oh, he's in a...
Chair Evans?
Jim, please, yeah.
Jim Carlson again. I was on that committee, and it was a lot of frustrations, but one of the problems with scheduling the outreach meetings was the locations. Some of the locations that they schedule them at, I have never been to. They were very difficult to find, and so a lot of people didn't come because of that. One of the biggest outreach programs we had was here at the city park right here, and that could have been very well done and repeated and things like that. But not to go, the back-based place like we did, and we didn't get enough people. And then we played some games and things like that. It was kind of interesting, but a little bit more, positive stuff like this, good locations, plan the attack, and go for it like this and try to get people to provide input. I'm on a bunch of subcommittees, but I did this before, and so I'll volunteer for that committee if we get a chance to make an impact. But before then, they interrupted us a lot when we had ideas and said, no, we can't do that because you're steering and you're not actually doing it.
Right.
I'm more of a doer than a steerer.
Thanks, Jim. Anybody else? Or Annie?
I'll scarily volunteer.
All right, fair enough. Charles.
So I want to answer Annie's question and follow on a little bit to what Debbie said. I went to every one of those meetings too. And to answer your question, one of the things that several of us strongly, Susan DeSantis, felt that they were lacking in was reaching out to younger people. Their social media thing was low caliber or to zero. The website was the big thing, and Kurt has experience at that if he manages to volunteer. But that part of it, specifically getting the same 20 or 30 of us, okay, the same 10 of us that go to everything, we're at everything. And there were no new people. I mean, zero new people. And so we thought, okay, well, getting young people would help. Now, we were in COVID and all kinds of other things, but the tools that they were using were not up to snuff. And Susan gave them some great ideas, and none of them were tried.
Gave the DUDAC sub-consultant.
The
Okay.
Kearns and West people ideas at public
Like
comment,
the sub.
nothing.
Okay.
So Dennis, real quick. Jim,
I'll work
did you
on the
want
mid
something?
40 age.
Sure. I just wanted to add a little bit here. One of the first things DUDEC's going to do is just create that plan. We've seen a similar plan with the housing element implementation as we discussed. And so obviously they're very familiar about what worked and what may not have worked, and so they're going to improve upon that. Again, they're going to create this draft. It's going to be one of the early deliverables. So I don't think this committee would be meeting probably for, I don't have a schedule on that deliverable, but it's probably not until August when we actually see it. So we're going to have them under contract basically at the end of this month. They're going to take, at least 3 to 4 weeks to prepare a draft for the committee to look at. And so it's not something that's going to be a commitment that would be immediate. But there may be 2 or 3 meetings to kind of go through those iterative drafts, and then this work would end with the final draft coming forward for the full committee to review. So I don't see this committee as being a long and ongoing committee. Unless there's shifts and changes, but I think that may come through the whole committee. So again, probably 2 to 3 meetings, in the month of August. Just to kind of hammer out what those details that are in the plan. So I don't know if that helps.
Thanks, Jim. Dennis, please.
Yeah, also responding to your question, one of the things I will really press for is that the subcommittee through this committee press them to kind of think out of the box. So an example would be Laird and others were responsible for a very successful event, the Bay water polo thing, and there has been some reference to pop-ups. So what I would envision would be that there would have been some kind of a pop-up there at that event that had a great turnout of a demographic that we're interested in, but was predominantly Newport Beach demographic. Otherwise, there weren't a lot of people from Costa Mesa and other cities there. And what was there, 150 people? I don't know, 300 or 400 people there, where if there had been a pop-up, when people were wandering around, they could have gone over and gotten information, contributed to it and stuff like that. And that's different than saying, and this is what happened the last time, we're going to have this event here, and as Charles said, the same 10 people showed up because the consultant was driving the schedule. And what I would like to see is it flipped over to where events happening in the city that we're not even aware of at certain times, that the consultant be ready to react and draw information from that. And that's just one example. I mean, there's other things out of the box that could be done.
I have one last question, and I know for time I'll make it quick. But I guess I don't know how it works, but can we put on the agenda for next time, since there does seem to be a bunch of people missing, that they could have the chance to volunteer? And then once we get to that point, can someone let us know who do volunteer, how that works? Because I'm assuming the consultants we hire are not predominantly Newport Mesa people. So why are they deciding what would be best for us to do? Because I agree, my son played at that thing. Every single person that goes to Newport Harbor High School or is a parent was there. So I would agree that's how it should be.
Annie, real quick, I have a question. So on the issue of volunteers, can we just send out an email and ask folks, right?
That was going to be a suggestion. You're just forming it tonight. You don't have to make up the membership, so we can definitely solicit the entire group's interest and their expertise areas.
Okay. So we have go ahead.
It wouldn't be excluded, so long as we do not exceed our quorum at the meetings. We can't be in violation of the Brown Act.
Okay, all right. All right, so we have a motion on the table from Dennis. I seconded it. We have any more discussion? Jim?
Yeah, I just had two additional comments. Based on what Mr. Campbell said, I would suggest, number one, that Dudek's initial August idea be on the agenda for this whole committee so that the whole committee can provide suggestions to the subcommittee that will be refining that initial thought. And number two, that the meetings of the subcommittee, that the staff commit to putting those on the calendar so those who do not volunteer can at least monitor what is happening at those as the other subcommittee meetings are noticed on the calendar. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. And I have one other quick question. So, Annie, you had a second point that you made, which was you wanted to use somebody that was local for the events?
Sorry, this is Annie. My question was that, because you made the comment, or someone made the comment about how if it's someone who Dudek hired or the last person, and so obviously I think the company, I believe, was out of Irvine or something, right? So, and you thought that they were giving you, not letting us, if we live here, right? How would we go about that? I guess we can talk about it in the future once we get to that point, but I guess I just didn't know how that worked. If you're not liking their ideas, why can't we just say, we don't like your ideas and you need to change it?
Jim, please.
Is that too simple of a question? I guess I'm confused.
No, it's a good question. Jim, please.
Those are all very good questions, and I know we've kind of talked a little bit about having, bring the general plan update process, if you will, to the community where the community is, as opposed to vice versa, because a lot of times, we hold a workshop and 10 people show up and it's not a very satisfying event. And so I think we want this plan to flip that script, if you will, find those community events that would be appropriate, for staff and the consultants and the committee members to come to, and then engage with the community and solicit feedback. Because, the traditional kind of approach where you bring the community in, 10 people show up, and you're not really getting a very a significant amount of input from the public. So I think that's all part of how we design these events, and that's part of the content that goes into this plan, and hence why I think it's important to have a group of committee members on a subcommittee to review that, make sure it says what we want it to say. Hopefully those events are maybe not identified, or maybe they can be because we don't really know exactly what events are going to occur and what are appropriate. Maybe a high school event might not be appropriate for this. There may be a lot of people there, but do the people at that event really actually want to take time away from that event to talk to the city about the general plan update? I don't even know. So it's a delicate thing to do, but we definitely want to have committee feedback on a subcommittee and how we develop this. And obviously we'll put it on the calendar, make sure everyone knows when these meetings occur, and we'll try to make as robust a plan as possible, knowing kind of what worked at the last go around and what didn't work, and make improvements. Hence why we want everyone's the committee's input.
I'd just like to sort of remind you guys are the engine here, and the consultants are there to provide wonderful resources because they have a lot of experience that as a whole we probably don't have. But this isn't their city. This is your city, our city. And so there's no reason not to. I mean, if you feel like it's going in the wrong direction, we have to speak up, and that's true in every element. So please don't be buffaloed. The council can always. The council's going to be the governor. I mean, they're going to, if they think the committee's gone too far in one direction, they'll pull it back. They'll change it because they're the final say. But I would suggest that we want to be bold. We want to be visionary. And not be constrained because of outside influences that you feel like, oh, well, they know more than I do. Well, they don't know your city. They don't know our city. Nobody knows it the way we do. So keep that in mind.
Thanks for that, Nancy. All right, so we have a motion on the table. Second, any public comment? No? All right. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, motion passes. And then, Ben, for the notes, we have Arlene, Dennis, Jim Carlson, Kurt Black, Annie, myself. Debbie, did you want to serve on that too?
As long as, depending on what time it is, because it's just something that I've looked at the last one, so I would like to look at it again,
Okay.
But I'll do my best. But
We'll put an asterisk next year.
but as long as it's not 4 o'clock.
All
That's
right, we got
Thanks.
you. Thanks, Debbie.
Right. Definitely need you because of CDMRA. It's one of the largest organizations that encompasses so many residents of the city.
And then Susan DeSantis as well. All right, thanks, Ben.
Are you going to be sending out an email?
Yes, I'm going to send an email as well, too. Thanks, Matt. All right, we are moving on to sub-item F under 5. I guess this is 4, sorry. On subcommittee updates. So, I know we've had several subcommittee meetings since the last time that we met, land use, a few others. So, Ben, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, just generally looking for I know last time Co-Chair Greer encouraged to identify one person to speak from each subcommittee, but I don't know that we did that. We were so excited about banning ranch and other hot topics that we just completely slipped our minds. So just, if it's at the pleasure of the co-chairs, just invite those who are in subcommittees to share. I'd also just like to take the time to acknowledge new committee members, Laidlaw and Rolfs. If you have subcommittees that you're interested in, please reach out to me, and I will reach out to you individually as well. Just know that for Brown Act purposes, we cannot exceed a certain threshold on a subcommittee. So you might love land use, but you might not be able to serve on land use. So I would encourage you to look elsewhere as well for other options.
Do we have any reports from people who came here this evening planning to give a report for their committee, like safety, noise? I know we don't have noise, but safety, Harbor and Bay,
So, because I'm being goaded here, I'll take that bait.
Okay.
The land use subcommittee met, and we worked through about half of the matrix items that we all looked at here before to make corrections and suggestions to, and we've got another meeting coming up on the 19th to hopefully get through the rest of those. We would have gotten through them all that night if it wasn't for me talking. So I'll leave that there now. That's all we did.
Thanks, Charles.
Do we have anything Bay and Harbor here in the Vision Committee or the Vision Committee? Anyone? Debbie?
So we've had a couple of meetings on the Vision Committee. So we've gone through like what are the key issues related to previously, and we've basically updated those. And I don't know, Ben, or if you guys, I assume that our work is now going to the consultant to kind of put it together as a vision statement. That, I mean, it was I thought it was kind of important to get it put together so we can have everybody look at it, because it's kind of the foundation of the general plan. But I think we got through all of the kind of our general comments. I think there were a few outstanding things, but anyway, so we actually kind of got it drafted, if you will, our portion.
Thank you, Co-Chair Greer. Arts and Culture, Historic Resources. We did meet on May 1. We haven't met since. Liz Westmoreland, who's our liaison with the city, has indicated that maybe in June or July, late June or in July, we would meet. But our esteemed co-chair has indicated maybe we want to meet beforehand, perhaps later this week or next week. So it's kind of a moving target, but arts and culture and historic resources will be focusing on that very soon. Thank
you. No, I actually am not the liaison for natural resources and recreation, but I did want to address Committee Member Stevens' comment about the vision statement. I don't see that as something that you need to feel like you filter through a consultant. I think the vision statement it's your vision, and I think that's something that if you're comfortable and to a point where you want to share those thoughts with the larger committee, I feel like that's probably one of the best ones to start with, and you're right. So I wouldn't deter you from going ahead and putting that forward for the larger committee's consideration, just to get some initial feedback at least.
Any feedback from safety,
fire? Does anyone on the safety subcommittee that, I don't know if we've met since that met? Okay, we haven't had one yet. Got it, okay.
Bay and Harbor, we had one meeting. And we're going to have another meeting next week, I think.
Okay.
So we had a presentation, and so we're just starting off. So.
Oh, good. Please bring it back next meeting. Thank you. Okay. Place here. Okay. Public comment on non-agenda items? I think we always have that on every agenda in the city. Okay, with there none being here, bring you back to the days. Committee announcements or matters which members would like placed on a future agenda for discussion, action, or report. Non-discussion items. Anything from the committee? Oh, Nancy, your items?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that I don't know if we need to vote or not on my suggestion about having a presentation from somebody in the finance department and somebody in the community development department for this larger committee. It's not an agenda item, and so I don't know how we get that onto an agenda.
Okay, and the demographics you asked.
Yeah, the
for a report on
demographics from
demographics.
the community development department, and then a report on our budget, our revenue and income into the city, and how we spend our money from the finance department.
That would go on the agenda.
Some of those, I think, are already done.
And that would go on the agenda, just as it did with the sustainability. So put that on the agenda for the next meeting and vote on it.
Thank you.
Okay. You want to make a motion for that, and we can second it and vote?
I would make a motion that we put that on the, do we?
You can vote to put it on the agenda.
Okay, so I would make a motion that we put that on the agenda for the next meeting.
Okay, second. By Dennis. All in favor? All right. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. Motion passes. Thank you, Nancy. All right. I think is that it?
Any other next agenda? Okay, please do. Go ahead.
So this is just a general comment, and I almost said it during the last, when we were talking about the committees, and I just would like Ben to take it back to the staff. I'm only speaking for myself, but I've been very pleased in the 3 committees by the preparation of the staff, and I've been also struck by the time. They've been very good at coming up with enough material to stimulate discussion and fill the time, but I don't walk out thinking like, wow, we didn't get to everything that we wanted to talk to or they wanted to present. All 3 of the committees that I'm on have been very, very good. I think the staff, I compliment the staff, at least so far. You know, it's theirs to screw up going forward.
That's what we have consultants for, Dennis. So once the consultant's on board, we'll have some shield. But no, thank you for that. And I did pass that along last time, and it does motivate to get that sort of feedback. We don't want to waste your time, and we want this to be meaningful even without consultant support. So appreciate that. And Jim wanted me to pass along his apologies. He had an appointment. He's a little bit of pain, so he had to leave early. I don't, TMI probably, but he wanted to extend his apologies to both the advisory committee and the steering committee for stepping out early. So thank you. Yeah, and then I guess to the co-chair prompting on this, Wednesday, July 5th is the next scheduled meeting, and that's already because we have this room scheduled, but that's right after the 4th of July holiday. So I think the co-chairs wanted to throw it out to see if you would rather meet later in the month of July as opposed to holding it right after the holiday. So I'll kind of let you take it from.
Go ahead, Jeremy.
Yeah, I mean, I would propose that, particularly because I'm going to be in Europe at that time. But that being said, obviously, if this group wants to meet without me, that's why we have 2 co-chairs, right? So, sorry, Arlene.
I can't be here. I'm going to be in Pittsburgh. My father is 103 years old, and he's been chosen to be the Grand Marshal of the July 4th Parade in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, so I will not be here. But
Right. Let's do it. Yes, sir. Can we, what's that last Monday in July? 24th, yeah. So, what day is the 5th? July 5th. What day is that? Is it Monday? It's a Wednesday.
it's the first. July 5th was the first Wednesday of the month, and when we had first met, we all agreed we were going to meet on the first Wednesday of the month, and it didn't work in June. And it's not going to work in July because it's a holiday.
And that just brings something up. Maybe it wouldn't hurt to go a second time around, because you guys have new members since the first time that was decided. Make sure it's working for everybody, because I do notice vacancies. And if there's a better date or time that works for everybody, it would be good to know. If that works, great. I mean, obviously, you always have to move things at some time.
Can we send out a doodle poll to make it easy? Yeah? Okay. All right.
And this will not happen again where neither Jeremy or I can be here. Wasn't planned.
Just a week later to the 11th.
The next. Okay. I could be back in town the following Wednesday. Okay. All right. You will receive a doodle poll, and everyone will have a great fun participating in that. So we'll wait to hear from everyone and hear from Ben and Jim as to when the next meeting will be. So with nothing more to discuss here, I'd like to adjourn the meeting. Oops, we do have one more comment. Mr. Mosher?
I believe I misspoke at the beginning of the meeting when I was questioning the earlier minutes. I thought the original agreement was to meet on the first Wednesday at 6 o'clock, and we seem to have changed to 5. So in your poll, you might also want to determine what is the best time for the group. And the following Wednesday, a week later than the first Wednesday, the second Wednesday, according to the city calendar, Coastal Commission will be meeting here. So this room is not available, and the Harbor Commission is using the alternate location at Marina Park. So that would not be a good night.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mosher. Okay. Motion to adjourn. Thank you all for coming. Have a great weekend. And July 4th.
Obviously, we do not have a quorum. So even though I feel like my opinion is wonderful, by itself it means nothing. But we can go through very quickly the agenda just in case there are comments, because I will still be making a report to council. We've had the update on the consultant and the implementation of the housing element. I went through, I had on my list of people for the candidates, but I have asked staff to arrange a meeting of the steering committee in the next week or two so we can get on top of that and not wait a whole month for that. Are there any comments on the consultant besides what we had at GPAC? I was here for the meeting, so I listened. Jim?
Oh, it's not on that consultant, but whether the steering committee is aware of it or not, tomorrow the city council will be looking at a revised agreement extending the contract with the other consultant, Kimley Horn, who is advising on the land use element updates. And I was a little surprised in the revised contract. They are expecting to complete that task with just 4 meetings with the GPAC. And I believe they've had 3 so far. 1 with the whole GPAC and then 2 with the subcommittees, and they don't seem to be quite done yet. So I'm not quite sure how they're going to complete that task.
Do we have any more scheduled if we need to? Okay, so we can schedule more.
Turn off. Thank you, Jim. Appreciate it. My response was yes, we can schedule additional meetings beyond just the 4 that are mentioned in the revised scope.
Okay. All right. As I say, the applicants, you've seen them. I've made my list. I'll have to wait for the others.
Sorry, Chair. If I may add, the city clerk's office provided me a late edition. It is Jeff Herdman provided an application. So in the next agenda, that will be included in that same packet.
All right.
Thank you.
Also, one of the things I wish to discuss with the steering committee is an attendance policy. Not that we all know how difficult it is. I mean, most of you are working and you always have certain conflicts. But we also have some people who are not attending. They're not attending these meetings. They're not attending subcommittee meetings. And we have 20 people at least that are eager to serve. So I am going to suggest to my fellow steering committee members that we have a policy that 3 unexcused absences, we would ask them to leave. Not excused. I mean, you've got an excuse. You're going to Europe. You're going to visit your father, whatever. But to people that just don't respond, that we ask them to remove themselves, and we will appoint someone else in their place so that we can have a full complement with each meeting that we have. So I will bring that forward. We tabled the land use and the, I was going to suggest as far as, and I haven't spoken to her, I don't speak to anybody on the steering committee because I have to be so careful with Brown Act violation, but we'll suggest that Kimberly be the liaison because she's been very focused on the outreach and very concerned about it, so that will be it. But we will schedule something so we can get these. Now, when is the contract supposed to go to council? In 2 weeks?
27th.
Yes, June 27th.
So let's try to get it in because it'd be nice to have the steering committee also. I mean, it can go without us, but it's still, that would be protocol, really. All right?
Got it.
Okay. Public comments.
So I strongly support the idea of having a limit on how many meetings somebody can miss unexcused. There are people that want to serve on this committee, and I don't see how you can do anything if you don't show up.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Jim, anything? No? Nancy? All right. I'm sorry. Did you have anything? Okay. I'm sorry it was short. Apparently, the messages came in from both of them, but only one message got through to you. Is that correct? As far as they're not being able to attend.
Yes, it was my understanding that we'd have a quorum, so I apologize.
Yeah, no, that's all right. So I will still send something for a temporary report for the council.
It's funny you should mention that I can manage a 30-member committee, but the 3-member committee gives me a hard time.
Yeah, right. All right. Meeting adjourned.